We continue our discussion on Financial Statement Analysis Unit 2, Annual Reports. In our previous discussion, we had seen how do we find the annual report and where do we find the annual report and what all it broadly entails, how the information could be useful in terms of financial statements analysis. Now we're going to look at individual items within the annual report and try and get some information out of those, right? So our idea now is to look at the major parts of the annual report, and we will look at major parts of the annual report separately for various companies, and probably try and understand if we can derive enough information about a company from the annual report itself, right? The first part that we're going to look at is essentially the letter to the shareholders, either by the chairman or the MD or the CEO of the company. This letter to shareholders is what we're going to kind of work with. Now, this is not necessarily available in all the annual reports. Some companies give it, some others don't, right? Only some companies give it. Typically, it's a good, useful feature where you can find a lot of information about what the company is doing, what are the plans of the company, and you can decipher or get a lot of information about the company's objectives, how the company is going to go ahead in terms of executing those plans, and what is the current stature of operations of the company. So this is more a commentary on what the company's purpose is, what the company's plans are, rather than a financial highlight of the last year. That financial highlight of the last year comes here in the director's report or the board's report. A letter to shareholders is more meant to be a direct communication by the company's head with the shareholders, outlining what is the plan and what the company is doing at this point of time. So let's probably pick up this from a particular company's reports and try and find out what data is available from this section where it is available. So for this purpose, again, we are going to look at this company called Eicher Motors, and we are going to look at the annual report for Eicher Motors for the calendar year 2014. Remember, they follow a January to December 2014 year. They follow a Jan to December year. So 2014 annual report is the latest one which is available with us. We'll look at that and try and understand what that data basically talks about, right? Where do we find this? So if you look at the annual report, right at the first part of the annual report is this letter to shareholders. The first page of the annual report as it starts is the letter to the shareholders. That's the managing director of the CEO of the company who's written this letter to shareholders, and we will look at taking out parts of this letter to shareholder and derive information which might be relevant. So for example, they start by saying a growth of 70% over the last year, while they have a commercial vehicle segment called Volvo Eicher commercial vehicle segment where sales were lower than the last year. And they talk about sales volume for commercial vehicles as well, which was slightly lower than the last year commercial vehicle volumes. Then they start talking more about individual points. It's a two-page document that you see here, not a very big document, but the key part around this document is that we could derive some of the relevant information about the company from this particular letter to the shareholders. So what we have done is we have basically taken out excerpts from this report, taken screenshots of some of the points that were made there. We will look at those points and try and derive this information and probably collate this information in another document. So we'll write down the major points that we learn from this letter to shareholders, and we'll create a list of all the major points that we learn about the company during this document, right? So that's what we have. Some companies write a letter to the shareholders talking about key developments in the industry, organization. This could be a source of a lot of information. We're looking at a case of Eicher Motors last year annual report, and we're looking at the data that they have, right? Now, they talk about some parts within the context of this report, which says, for example, at 22.5%, Royal Enfield's 2014 EBIT margin, earnings before interest and tax margin, is better than that of any motorcycle company in the world, right? And possibly the highest level compared to any automotive brand globally as well. Usually, your two-wheeler companies have about 10 to 12% or 10 to 15% in the best case of EBIT margins, right? The green highlighting has been done by us to understand what are possibly some of the more important parts. They have also said that Volvo Eicher commercial vehicles, that's VECV. So VECV, wherever it is used, is Volvo, which is a global commercial vehicle brand, Eicher commercial vehicles. That's a joint venture between these two companies. And they've said EBIT margin of this at 3.7, which is significantly lower than the motorcycle company margin, was still the best amongst Indian commercial vehicle companies in 2014, right? It also says that it is the only commercial vehicle company to remain profitable in every quarter during the longest downturn in the recent decades in the Indian commercial vehicle industry. So most other commercial vehicle companies have made losses in at least one quarter. These guys have not made any losses in any of the quarters, right? Then let's look at the right side. What's said? Another part of the report says from manufacturing and selling less than 40,000 units for most of the first decade to making 50,000 units in 2010, they now sell more than 3 lakh motorcycles in 2014. So what used to be 50,000 in 2010 has become 300,000 or 3 lakh in 2014. What they also say is their intent is to create a new category in motorcycling globally, one that heralds a return to fun and evocative mid-size motorcycling, where motorcycling refers to owning, riding, caring, and living with a motorcycle. Now, 2 points here. One, that their growth in motorcycles is significant, so they have a lot of growth that you find that's happening around this point. The second point is rather than treating motorcycles as just travel equipments, right? Most other companies probably treat motorcycle as travel equipment. These guys have tried to create some sort of a brand outside of it, right? So the brand basically says that people will take pride in owning this vehicle, and what helps them is that they basically manufacture the Royal Enfield and Bullet brands, which have traditionally been strong brands in motorcycling around the country. So essentially, these motorcycles are carrying a brand, and brand allows them to kind of charge higher, so the volume and value both can increase around this period. What also happens is that it allows them to maintain a certain amount of demand and growth, right? So that's possibly interesting because not many companies talk this language, and this language tells us that the company is probably looking to kind of create a brand and maintain that brand over a period of time, which means demand should stay strong regardless of what happens in the industry if the brand is created and the brand is strong, right? Let's actually note down these points. So we have another document that we have kind of outlined. We'll put down all these data points. At more than 22% EBIT margin, most profitable two-wheeler company in world, right? Commercial vehicles segment, the only company to not make losses in any quarter in the last decade. That's what they say. Production of bikes or two-wheelers increased from 50,000 in 2014 to 300,000 in 50,000 in 2010 to 300,000 in 2014, right? Then trying to create a brand of the motorcycle segment, right? So there is a lot of investment that's happening there. That's the first part that we get from these two data points. And let's go ahead. Let's look at what more do they talk about. So they talk about the fact that with over 95% market share in the segment that is growing at 50% each year, Royal Enfield has created this category in India. Now, the motorcycle segment is divided into multiple segments based on this on the capacity of a vehicle. So you have 100 cc vehicles, you have 150 cc vehicles. This segment, Royal Enfield, is in greater than 350 cc vehicles, right? This is growing at more than 50% each year, and Royal Enfield or Eicher Motors has a 95% market share in this market. So it's like a virtual monopoly. There is no other player in the segment at all, or very small players in the segment who are there. They have a significant market share in that, and that they're trying to work on. Then they're also looking at international markets, strategic foray into international markets, where we have been selling motorcycles for decades, but with low support, right? So they're saying that some of the markets like US, UK are highly influential, but more importantly, in Latin America and Southeast Asia, motorcycles like in India are popular as a favorite means of daily commute. They're not so popular in developed nations. The size of these markets is much larger than that of the developed countries, and similar to India in the enormous potential to upgrade to mid-sized motorcycles. These are markets who have, like India, had a lot of 100 to 150 cc bikes. There, the similar demographic profile works. So expand to global markets where with similar demographics as India, right? When we say similar demographics, similar customer profile as India, right? So that's the first part. Then they are also talking about their capacity expansion plans. So they are reaching a capacity of 450,000 units in 2015. Remember, 300,000 in 2014. Now 450,000 in 2015, 600,000 or 6 lakhs in 2016. They are also investing in upgrading our capabilities in product development with 2 new technology centers on the anvil. So a lot of investment also happening in research and development. R&D investments are also happening. This is a technology intensive industry, and to maintain what you're doing and to continue doing that in a good fashion, you do need investments in technology, which the company is also trying to do. So what else do we learn? 95% market share in mid-sized bike segment in India, market growing at 50%, right? Then trying to expand in international markets with similar characteristics as India, right? And namely your Latin America, South American countries, Latin America, and Southeast Asia, right? And Southeast Asia, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, all these countries would also come in, right? Then capacity expansion from 3 lakhs in 2014 to 6 lakhs in 2016, right? Investment in research and development as well. That's what they're doing as well, right? Let's go ahead, look at some more data points about this. Then what else have they done? They report that they have taken, after leading Harley Davidson's geographic expansion across emerging markets, industry veteran Rod Copes has recently joined our team to drive Royal Enfield's growth in North America. Harley Davidson is the is the most well-known mid-sized and upper middle-sized bikes company in the world. And they've recruited someone from that company after this person had led the growth of Harley Davidson in emerging markets and put him in charge in North America. They also have one of the most prolific industrial designers for motorcycles. Remember, these are premium motorcycles, need high technology and also need good designs. And they have taken the design from Ducati, which is another big motorcycle firm. Head of design for Ducati. They have recruited this person in the company. So recruitment of well known industry professionals in the company that outlines their commitment to increasing the offering and size of the bikes market in India. Right. Now let's look at what is the commercial vehicle segment doing. Volvo Eicher commercial vehicle segment outpaced the industry in both 5 to 10 ton light and medium duty LMD vehicles and buses segments. In light and medium duty vehicles, VECV recorded its highest ever market share of 32% for the year. In the buses segment as well, they posted best ever market share of about 15%. This was despite the overall market falling for these segments, right? Volvo's trucks division saw a growth of 27%, and they also had a growth of 77% in international sales, right? And then the final concluding remarks, which say there are significant growth opportunities that lie ahead of us. We have long-term strategies to seize these opportunities and creatively, over the next many months and years, make Royal Enfield and Eicher trucks and buses truly global brands. So they have global ambition that they are trying to kind of play out. There will be a lot of focus on exports as well that will happen from this. So what else do we learn? Let's put all of this also in our document and put this in. So what they're saying is that recruitment of top talent from the world. In addition, Volvo Eicher commercial vehicle clocks highest market share for the segments it is in. It caters to. What are these segments? LMD, light and medium duty vehicles, and buses, right? High growth in exports of commercial vehicles, right? And long-term strategy in place, which is typically what most companies would say. So I'll not put that down as a point here. But from this letter to shareholders, we have been able to kind of find out all these relevant information for us when we are trying to analyze a company and its data points. It's an important yardstick for us to kind of gauge sometimes what developments a company is going through, what are they trying to expand in. And it gives us a benchmark to kind of compare it with, let's say, other companies, whether they give this information, whether they do not give this information. In itself, it's good to know all this about the company, which probably we did not know before the start of this exercise. So purely by going through this particular letter to shareholders, we get a fair bit of information about what the company is doing, what the company is doing well, what it is not doing well, and how's it planning to go ahead in subsequent years and quarters. Right? So that's what we derive from our letter to shareholders, and that's probably one of the more important parts wherever it is available of the annual report. As we go ahead, we'll look at more important points like financial highlights and financial statements in subsequent videos.